My husband inherited millions and kicked me out. 24 hours later, everything fell apart for him in the worst way. My name is Molly, and I am 34 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and until very recently I thought I had a normal marriage. Not perfect, but stable. My husband Derek and I had been together for 8 years. We built everything from nothing side by side, penny by penny. I never imagined that money could change a person in just a few hours. I used to believe our love was strong enough to survive anything. I was wrong. Before I begin this story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if stories about betrayal karma and finding your strength resonate with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you will want to stay for how this one ends. I met Derek 10 years ago at a small coffee shop in downtown Columbus. It was one of those places with mismatched furniture and the smell of fresh pastries always lingering in the air. I was 24 then, working part-time as a barista while finishing my master's degree in accounting. I had dreams of opening my own firm someday, but at that moment I was just trying to pay rent and keep my head above water. Derek walked in on a Tuesday afternoon. He was 26 with tired eyes and a wrinkled shirt. He had just lost his job at a marketing firm, and you could see the weight of it on his shoulders. He sat alone at a corner table with a cup of coffee that went cold because he forgot to drink it. He just stared out the window, looking lost. I remember walking over to check on him, asking if he wanted a warm refill. He looked up at me startled, like he had forgotten other people existed. Then he tried to stand up to hand me his cup, and he knocked the whole thing over. Coffee spilled across the table and onto his already wrinkled shirt. I grabbed some napkins and helped him clean up. He apologized about 15 times in 30 seconds. I laughed and told him it was fine, that I had seen much worse. That small moment of kindness sparked a conversation. He told me about losing his job, about feeling like a failure at 26. I told him about my classes, my dreams, my own struggles with money. We talked until my shift ended. Then we walked through the park nearby, sharing a cheap pizza because neither of us could afford anything more. There was something about him that night. He had this warm smile, even when his eyes looked sad. He had hope, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. Our first dates were simple. Walks in the park, coffee at the shop where we met, splitting appetizers at restaurants because entrees were too expensive. He would bring me wildflowers he picked from the side of the road because he could not afford real bouquets. I did not care. Those wilting dandelions meant more to me than roses ever could. The early years were hard. Derek was unemployed for 8 months. I picked up a second job waitressing at a diner on weekends. I would work at the coffee shop from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then head straight to the diner until 11 at night. I was exhausted all the time, but I never complained. We were in this together. I used my savings that I'd been setting aside for a down payment on my student loans to help Derek pay off his credit card debt. He had racked up about $12,000 just trying to survive after losing his job. It hurt to watch that money disappear, but I told myself it was an investment in our future. In us. We lived in a tiny studio apartment on the east side of the city. The heat barely worked in winter, and the air conditioning was non-existent in summer. We slept on a mattress on the floor because we could not afford a bed frame. The walls were thin, and we could hear our neighbors arguing every night. But we made it work. We would cook cheap meals together and watch movies on my old laptop. We would dream about the future, about the house we would buy someday, about the children we would have. Derek finally got a job as a salesman at a car dealership. It was not glamorous, but it was steady. He was good at it too. He had this way of making people feel comfortable, of listening to what they actually needed, instead of just pushing the most expensive option. Within a year, he was one of the top sellers at the dealership. I graduated with my master's degree and found a position at a small accounting firm. The pay was modest, but it was a start. I worked long hours, determined to prove myself. I wanted to be a partner someday. I wanted to build something. We got married at the courthouse on a rainy Thursday afternoon. We could not afford a wedding, so we did not have one. Derek wore a suit he borrowed from his friend. I wore a white sundress I found at a thrift store for $12. 2 of our friends came as witnesses. We exchanged vows we had written on notebook paper. There was no cake, no flowers, no fancy reception. Just us and our promise to each other. After the ceremony, we went to a diner and split a piece of pie. Derek looked at me across the table, his eyes shining, and said words I will never forget. He said you stayed with me when I had nothing. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. I will never forget that, Molly. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much that means to me. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. 3 years into our marriage, we finally saved enough for a down payment on a house. It was a small place, a fixer-upper in a modest neighborhood. The roof leaked, the kitchen was outdated, and the backyard was more weeds than grass. But it was ours. We spent every weekend working on that house. Derek would come home from the dealership, change into old clothes, and start painting or fixing or building. I would handle the finances, making sure we could afford each project without going into debt. We installed new floors ourselves, watching tutorials online, and making plenty of mistakes along the way. We painted every room, choosing colors together, arguing playfully about shades of blue. I poured my annual bonuses into paying down the mortgage. While my coworkers went on vacations or bought new cars, I put every extra dollar toward our house. I did not buy new clothes. I did not get my hair done at fancy salons. I cut coupons and shopped sales, and made sacrifices because I believed in our shared future. Derek got promoted to sales manager. His income increased significantly. Things started to feel easier. We went out to dinner occasionally. We took a weekend trip to Chicago for our 5th anniversary. We started talking about starting a family. That is when we discovered that I had fertility issues. The doctors said it was not impossible for me to get pregnant, but it would be difficult. They recommended in vitro fertilization. We tried twice. Each attempt cost around $20,000, and our insurance covered very little. Both attempts failed. I remember sitting in the bathroom after the second negative test, crying so hard I could not breathe. Derek held me and told me it would be okay. He said we would try again, that money could be replaced, that a family was worth any price. We had spent almost $40,000 on those 2 attempts. Our savings were nearly gone. But Derek kept saying we would rebuild. We would try again. Together. I believed him. I always believed him. Looking back now, I can see that I was so focused on building our future that I did not notice the cracks forming in our present. I was so busy working and saving and sacrificing that I missed the signs of what was coming. Or maybe I saw them and just did not want to believe what they meant. Either way, I was about to learn that the foundation I thought we had built together was made of sand, and it was about to wash away. Derek's grandmother Eleanor was 89 years old and lived alone in a large house in Bexley, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Columbus. The house was a beautiful colonial with white columns and a perfectly manicured lawn. It sat on nearly 2 acres of land surrounded by old oak trees that had been there for a century. Eleanor was a widow. Her husband, Gerald, had been a successful real estate developer who passed away 15 years before I met Derek. He left Eleanor everything, including properties across Ohio, stocks, bonds, and enough cash to last several lifetimes. The estate was worth millions. Derek was Eleanor's only grandchild. His parents died in a car accident when he was 19, just a few months before he would have graduated college. Eleanor paid for the rest of his education, covering tuition and living expenses. But after he graduated, she cut off the financial support. She said she wanted him to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, to understand the value of hard work. Derek resented her for that. He never said it outright, but I could tell. Whenever we visited her, which was not often, there was a tension between them. He smiled and made small talk, but his jaw was always tight. He would complain on the drive home about how she was sitting on all that money while we struggled. My relationship with Eleanor was complicated at first. When Derek introduced me to her, she looked me up and down like she was appraising a piece of furniture. She asked about my family, my education, my career plans. I felt like I was being interviewed for a job I was not qualified for. Over time, though, Eleanor warmed up to me. I think she appreciated that I was not after Derek's potential inheritance. I did not know how much she was worth when I started dating him, and frankly, I did not care. I fell in love with a broke, unemployed man who could not even afford to buy me coffee. Her money never factored into it. About 2 years before she passed, Eleanor invited me to her house for tea. Just me, not Derek. I was nervous, unsure of what she wanted. I drove to Bexley on a Saturday afternoon, my hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. She greeted me at the door herself, despite having a housekeeper who could have done it. She led me to a sunroom at the back of the house, where a silver tea service was already set up. We sat across from each other in wicker chairs, surrounded by plants and afternoon sunlight. She studied me for a long moment before speaking. She said she had been watching me for years. She had seen how I treated Derek, how I supported him, how I sacrificed for him. She said she knew the kind of person I was. Then she told me something that surprised me. She said she knew the kind of person Derek was too. She said he was her grandson, and she loved him, but she was not blind. She had seen the way he looked at money, the way he talked about her estate, when he thought she was not listening. She knew he was waiting for her to die. I did not know what to say. I tried to defend Derek, to explain that he was just stressed about finances, that he did not really mean anything by it. But Eleanor held up her hand to stop me. She said she had made a decision about her will. She wanted me to know about it because she wanted me to be prepared. She said she was leaving her estate to Derek and me jointly with certain conditions. If we remained married and faithful to each other, we would inherit everything together. But if Derek ever betrayed me, if he ever abandoned me or was unfaithful, the entire estate would go to me alone. She showed me a copy of the will. I read through it, my heart pounding. I asked her why she was doing this. She smiled sadly and said it was because she knew what men could become when money was involved. Her own husband had been a good man, but she had seen plenty of marriages destroyed by greed. She wanted to protect me. She wanted to make sure that if Derek ever showed his true colors, I would not be left with nothing. I thanked her, but I told her I did not think it would ever come to that. I said Derek loved me. I said we had been through too much together for him to ever betray me. Eleanor just nodded and said she hoped I was right. Then she changed the subject to gardening, and we spent the rest of the afternoon talking about roses. I never told Derek about that conversation. I am not sure why. Maybe I felt guilty, like I was somehow being disloyal by even listening to Eleanor's concerns. Maybe I wanted to believe so badly that she was wrong about him that I pushed the whole thing out of my mind. I wish now that I had paid more attention. About 6 months before Eleanor died, Derek started visiting her more frequently. He said he was concerned about her health, that she was getting frail, and he wanted to spend more time with her while he still could. I thought it was sweet. I was proud of him for putting aside his resentment to be there for her, but he never invited me to come along anymore. At first I thought he just wanted someone on one time with his grandmother. Family bonding, I told myself. Nothing strange about that. Then I started noticing other things. He would take phone calls in another room, lowering his voice when I walked by. He started coming home later than usual, saying he had stayed late at the dealership. He seemed distracted during dinner, checking his phone constantly. One night, I saw a text notification flash on his screen. It was from someone named Jay, and it said, "I miss you," followed by a heart emoji. My stomach dropped. I asked Derek who Jay was. He grabbed his phone quickly and said it was just a coworker named Jake who had a weird sense of humor. He laughed it off, said Jake was always sending stupid messages like that as a joke between the guys at work. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I pushed down my doubts and told myself I was being paranoid. We had been together for 8 years. He would never cheat on me. He was not that kind of person. Eleanor passed away on a cold night in November. She died peacefully in her sleep. The housekeeper found her the next morning, looking serene, like she had simply drifted off. She was 89 years old and had lived a full life. The funeral was held at a historic church in Bexley. Hundreds of people attended, wealthy neighbors, business associates, distant relatives who crawled out of the woodwork. Derek stood at the front, accepting condolences, playing the role of the grieving grandson. I stood beside him, holding his hand, trying to be supportive. But something felt off. Derek cried during the service, but his tears seemed performative, like he was going through the motions. He kept checking his phone during the reception. At one point, I saw him smile at a text message while we were literally standing next to his grandmother's casket. A week after the funeral, the lawyer called. Harold Whitman, Eleanor's attorney, wanted Derek to come to his office for the reading of the will. Derek told me it was just a formality, that he would handle it himself. He kissed me on the forehead and drove away. He was gone for 3 hours. When he came home, his face was unreadable. He sat down at the kitchen table and just stared at the wall for a long time. Finally, I asked him what happened. He said Eleanor had left him everything. The house, the savings, the stocks, all of it. He said it was worth around $4 million. I was stunned. I hugged him and congratulated him. I said we could finally try IVF again, that we could adopt, that we could do all the things we had dreamed about. Our financial struggles were over, but Derek did not hug me back. He just sat there stiff with a strange look in his eyes. I asked him what was wrong. He said he needed time to think, that it was a lot to process. He said he was going to sleep on the couch that night because he needed space. I lay awake in our bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like something terrible was about to happen. I just did not know what. 2 days after the will reading, I woke up to find Derek already awake. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a leather briefcase I had never seen before. His face was cold, expressionless, like he was looking at a stranger. He told me to sit down. His voice was flat, businesslike. I felt ice forming in my stomach as I pulled out a chair across from him. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking. He said our marriage was not working anymore. He said he wanted a divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow. I could not breathe. I asked him what he was talking about, where this was coming from. We had just talked about starting a family again, about all the possibilities the inheritance opened up. He cut me off. He said he had made up his mind, and that I needed to leave the house by the end of the day. I could not comprehend what I was hearing. I reminded him that this was our house. We had bought it together. We had built it together with our own hands. He shook his head. He said he had checked, and the mortgage was in his name. He said I had no legal right to be there. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie. Both of our names were on the mortgage. I had handled all the paperwork myself, but I was too shocked to argue in that moment. He slid a stack of papers across the table. He said it was a divorce agreement. He said he was being generous by offering me $10,000 to start over somewhere else. $10,000. After 8 years of marriage. After everything I had sacrificed for him. After working 2 jobs to support him when he had nothing. After using my savings to pay off his debts. After spending $40,000 on IVF treatments that failed. He wanted to give me $10,000 and send me away. I started crying. I asked him why he was doing this, what had changed. I asked if this was about the money, if the inheritance had somehow corrupted him. He said it was not about the money. He said he had been unhappy for a long time. He said I was holding him back. Holding him back. The words burned like acid. I had given him everything. I had believed in him when no one else did. And now I was holding him back. While we were arguing, his phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a notification. The name Jessica appeared, followed by a heart emoji and a message preview. Babe, has she signed yet? I cannot wait to move into the mansion with you. Time stopped. I grabbed the phone before he could react. He lunged for it, but I was faster. I read the message. Then I scrolled through the conversation. It was all there. Months of messages between Derek and someone named Jessica. Intimate messages, plans for the future. References to the mansion, which I realized meant Eleanor's house. And worst of all, messages mocking me. Derek had called me naive, clueless, a useful placeholder until something better came along. Something better was Jessica, a 28-year-old saleswoman at the dealership. She was the J from those text messages. Not Jake, a male co-worker with a weird sense of humor. Jessica, the woman my husband had been sleeping with for 2 years. 2 years. While I was working overtime to save for our future. While I was undergoing painful fertility treatments. While I was lying next to him every night, trusting him completely. He was with her. I threw the phone at him. It hit his chest and clattered to the floor. I was screaming, crying, demanding answers. How could he do this? How long had this been going on? Did he ever really love me? He did not even try to deny it. He just shrugged and said he had found someone who appreciated him. He said Jessica understood him in ways I never could. He said she was young and fun and exciting. And rich now, he added. Thanks to the inheritance. I felt sick. He had been planning this all along. He had been waiting for Eleanor to die so he could take the money and run off with his mistress. Every visit to his grandmother's house, every late night at the dealership, every secretive phone call. It was all part of his scheme. He told me I had 2 hours to pack my things and leave. He said he had already changed the locks and that if I was not gone by noon, he would call the police. I was in such a state of shock that I actually started packing. I moved through our bedroom like a zombie stuffing clothes into a suitcase. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. I called Rachel my best friend since college. She was a family law attorney, sharp and fierce. I was crying so hard she could barely understand me, but she told me to come straight to her place. She said we would figure this out together. When I walked out of my house for what I thought was the last time I saw a silver BMW parked across the street, a young woman sat in the driver's seat watching me. She had long, dark hair and a smug smile on her face. Jessica. She had come to watch me leave, to witness her victory. She waved at me, a little flutter of her fingers mocking and triumphant. I got in my car and drove away through a blur of tears. The rain started falling as I pulled out of the driveway, like even the sky was crying for me. I made it to Rachel's apartment somehow. I do not remember the drive. I just remember collapsing on her couch, shaking, unable to form coherent sentences. Rachel made me tea and sat with me while I fell apart. She did not say much at first. She just let me cry and scream and rage until I was empty. Then, when I was finally calm enough to listen, she asked me one question. She asked me to tell her everything I knew about Eleanor's will. That night, I lay on Rachel's couch, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's cold face. I heard Jessica's mocking laughter. I felt the weight of 8 years crumbling into dust. Rachel stayed up with me until nearly 3 a.m. She was not just my friend that night. She was my lifeline. She asked careful questions about everything, the marriage, the finances, the inheritance. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her attorney brain already working on a strategy. Somewhere around 2 a.m, I remembered the conversation with Eleanor. The tea in the sunroom. The will she had shown me. The conditions she had written. I sat up, suddenly my heart racing. I told Rachel everything about Eleanor's suspicions about Derek, about the clause that would transfer all assets to me if he was unfaithful. Rachel's eyes went wide. She asked if I had any documentation. I thought hard. Eleanor had shown me a copy of the will that day, and I had taken a photo of it on my phone just in case. I never thought I would actually need it. I had almost forgotten I had done it. I found the photo in my camera roll dated 2 years ago. It was blurry but readable. Rachel zoomed in on the key passages, her lips moving silently as she read. She looked at me with something like hope in her eyes. She said we needed to contact Eleanor's lawyer first thing in the morning. I barely slept for the rest of the night. My mind kept spinning through possibilities. What if the will had changed? What if Derek had somehow manipulated Eleanor into removing that clause? What if I was grasping at straws trying to find hope where there was none? At 8:30 the next morning, Rachel and I were sitting in the waiting room of Harold Whitman's law office. The receptionist had tried to tell us we needed an appointment, but Rachel used her attorney voice and got us in anyway. Mr. Whitman was a distinguished man in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He remembered me from the funeral, where I had shaken his hand briefly in the receiving line. He invited us into his office and listened as I explained what had happened. The affair. The sudden demand for divorce. Derek's claim that he had inherited everything. Mr. Whitman nodded slowly. Then he pulled a thick folder from his desk drawer. He said Derek had not told me the truth about the will. He said the document contained specific provisions that Derek had conveniently failed to mention. He read the relevant passages aloud. Eleanor had indeed left her estate to Derek and me, jointly contingent on us remaining married for 5 years after her death. But more importantly, there was a morality clause. If either spouse was unfaithful or abandoned, the other their share would be forfeited entirely to the remaining spouse. Derek had lied. He had looked me in the eye and told me the will left everything to him alone. He had tried to push me out before I could learn the truth. Mr. Whitman said there was more. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Eleanor's elegant cursive. She had left me a personal letter separate from the will. I opened it with trembling hands. The letter was dated 3 months before Eleanor's death. In it, she wrote that she hoped I would never have to read these words, that she hoped Derek would prove her wrong about him. But she said she knew her grandson, and she knew the seductive power of money. She wrote that I had been a better daughter to her in 8 years than Derek had been a grandson in 36. She said she saw the way I loved him, the way I sacrificed for him, and it broke her heart to think he might not deserve it. She wrote that if I was reading this letter, it meant her fears had come true. She said she was sorry she could not protect me from the pain, but she hoped the provisions in her will would at least protect me from the financial devastation. She ended the letter by saying that I was stronger than I knew, and that I would find happiness again with or without Derek. I was crying so hard by the end that I could barely see the words. Rachel put her arm around me, while Mr. Whitman quietly pushed a box of tissues across his desk. While I was collecting myself, Mr. Whitman made some phone calls. He spoke to the bank that managed Eleanor's accounts. He contacted the title company that held the deed to the Bexley mansion. He was building a case. Meanwhile, Derek had been busy making mistakes. Mr. Whitman showed us that Derek had already posted photos on social media, pictures of himself in Eleanor's house, pictures with Jessica, announcements about his new life. He had changed his relationship status on Facebook. He had even put up a real estate listing for the house I shared with him, listing himself as the sole owner. Every single one of those actions was documented evidence. Every photo, every post, every listing. Derek was building the case against himself without even realizing it. Mr. Whitman placed a call to Derek's cell phone. I could hear it ringing through the speaker. Derek answered with a casual hello, probably expecting a routine legal matter. Mr. Whitman introduced himself and said there had been some developments regarding Eleanor's estate that required Derek's immediate attention. He said Derek needed to come to the office that afternoon. Derek's voice sounded confused. He said everything had already been settled, that he had the inheritance. Mr. Whitman said he was mistaken and that they needed to discuss it in person. He said it would be in Derek's best interest to come. I could hear the uncertainty creeping into Derek's voice as he agreed to come at 2 o'clock. Rachel and I went to get lunch, but I could not eat. I just pushed food around my plate, watching the clock counting down the hours until I would see Derek again. At 1:45, we were back in Mr. Whitman's office. At 2 o'clock sharp, Derek walked through the door. He stopped dead when he saw me. Jessica was with him, dressed in designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She had her arm linked through Derek's, her chin tilted up with smug confidence. Derek demanded to know what I was doing there. His face was red with anger. Mr. Whitman gestured for everyone to sit. Derek and Jessica took seats on one side of the conference table. Rachel and I sat on the other. Mr. Whitman stood at the head. He began reading from the will slowly and clearly, making sure everyone understood every word. I watched Derek's face as the morality clause was read aloud. I watched the color drain from his skin. I watched his jaw tighten and his hands grip the armrests of his chair. Jessica's expression shifted too, from smug confidence to confusion to something like panic. When Mr. Whitman finished reading, the room was silent. Derek tried to argue. He said the affair did not count because we were not technically divorced yet. He said he had not abandoned me, that he had simply asked me to leave. Mr. Whitman calmly presented the evidence. The text messages between Derek and Jessica obtained through legal channels, which proved the affair had been ongoing for 2 years. The social media posts announcing their relationship. The real estate listing for our house, which Derek had posted without my knowledge or consent. He also presented a sworn statement from Eleanor's housekeeper, who had witnessed Derek and Jessica together at the mansion on multiple occasions while Eleanor was still alive. Derek had been bringing his mistress into his grandmother's home while she lay dying. Jessica turned to Derek with fury in her eyes. She demanded to know if he had known about this clause. Had he known the whole time? Derek stammered. He tried to explain that he thought the clause was unenforceable, that his lawyer had told him they could fight it. Jessica was not listening. She stood up so fast her chair nearly fell over. She screamed that she had wasted 2 years of her life on him. 2 years of sneaking around, of waiting for the old woman to die, of planning their future together. And now, there was nothing. She ripped the diamond ring from her finger, the one Derek had bought her with money he assumed he had inherited. She threw it at his face. It bounced off his cheek and clattered to the floor. She said there was something else she wanted him to know. She said she had already sent screenshots of their text messages to Derek's boss. She had been planning to do it after they moved in together, to burn the bridge and make sure he could never go back. But now she was glad she had done it early. Derek went pale. His job. On top of everything else, he was about to lose his job. Jessica stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Derek just sat there staring at the table. He looked like a man watching his entire life collapse in slow motion. Finally, he looked up at me. His eyes were wet, his voice was hoarse. He said my name like a question, like he was hoping I would save him somehow. I stood up. I looked at the man I had loved for 8 years. The man I had supported through unemployment, through debt, through every struggle. The man who had promised to spend his life making me happy. I said I used to love him. I said I would have given him everything. But he chose money over love, and now he did not have either. I walked out of that office with my head held high. Rachel walked beside me, squeezing my hand. Behind me, I could hear Derek calling my name, but I did not look back. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, paperwork, and emotional exhaustion. Mr. Whitman guided me through every step. The will was ironclad, he assured me. Eleanor had worked with the best estate attorneys in Ohio to make sure her wishes could not be contested. Derek's infidelity and abandonment triggered the morality clause, and every piece of evidence pointed to his guilt. Derek tried to fight it anyway. He hired his own lawyer, a cheap one he found online because he could not afford anyone better. They filed motions, made objections, tried every angle they could think of. None of it worked. 3 months after Eleanor's death, the estate was officially transferred to me. The mansion in Bexley valued at $1.5 million. The investment accounts worth another $2.3 million. Various other assets including jewelry, art, and a vintage car collection. The total value was just over $4 million. I was wealthy beyond anything I had ever imagined, and I had never felt more empty. Derek, meanwhile, lost everything. His job at the dealership was gone within a week of Jessica's revelation. His boss had fired him not just for the affair, but for conducting personal business on company time, using company resources for his relationship with Jessica, and creating a hostile work environment. The house we had shared, the one Derek claimed was his alone, was now subject to division. Rachel helped me gather all the evidence of my contributions over the years, the mortgage payments I had made, the renovation costs I had covered, the bills I had paid while Derek spent his money on Jessica. In the end, the court awarded me 70% of the equity. Derek got 30%, which came out to around $45,000 after the mortgage was paid off. He used that money to pay his legal fees and clear some debts. Within a few months, he was broke. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Derek moved to Indiana to live with a cousin. He was working at a used car lot, making a fraction of what he used to earn. Jessica had disappeared completely, probably moved on to her next wealthy target. The mansion in Bexley stood empty for weeks after the estate was settled. I could not bring myself to go there. Every time I drove past, I thought about Eleanor sitting in her sunroom, warning me about the man I loved. I thought about all the signs I had ignored, all the red flags I had explained away. Finally, Rachel convinced me to visit. She came with me, holding my hand as I walked through rooms I had only seen a handful of times before. The house was beautiful. High ceilings, hardwood floors, antique furniture that had been in Eleanor's family for generations. French doors opened onto a garden that must have been stunning in spring, though now in winter it was just bare branches and brown grass. I found Eleanor's personal study on the second floor. Her desk was still covered with papers, books, photographs. On the wall hung a portrait of her with her husband Gerald, painted sometime in the 1970s. They looked so happy, so in love. I sat in her chair and cried for a long time. On the desk I found a leather album filled with photographs from Eleanor's life. Her wedding day, her children being born, though both had passed before her. Derek as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, and tucked in the back photos of me and Derek together that I had not known existed. Our wedding day at the courthouse. Derek and me working on the house covered in paint. Holiday dinners that must have been taken without my knowledge. Eleanor had been watching, documenting. She knew exactly who her grandson was, and she had prepared for this moment. There was a final photograph in the album, one that made me catch my breath. It showed Eleanor and me at some family gathering sitting together on a porch swing. I did not remember the photo being taken, but I remembered that day. We had talked for hours about life, love, loss. She had told me about Gerald, about how much she missed him, about how real love was about showing up for someone every single day, not just when it was convenient. On the back of the photo in Eleanor's handwriting were 3 words: "She deserves better." The first few months after moving into the mansion were difficult. I had money now more than I could ever spend. but money could not fill the emptiness inside me. I would wake up in the middle of the night reaching for Derek's side of the bed, forgetting for a moment that he was gone. Then reality would crash back, and I would lie there in the darkness wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I started seeing a therapist twice a week. Her name was Dr. Patterson, a calm woman in her 50s with a soothing voice and an ability to ask exactly the right questions. She helped me understand that the betrayal was not my fault, that I had not missed the signs because I was stupid, but because I had loved and trusted deeply. That capacity for love was a strength, she said, not a weakness. I did not believe her at first, but over time her words started to sink in. Rachel came over frequently, refusing to let me isolate myself. She would bring takeout and wine, and we would sit in Eleanor's sunroom talking for hours. She made me laugh again, something I had not thought possible in those dark early days. I also reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage, people I had lost touch with because I was always working, always saving, always focused on Derek and our future together. They welcomed me back without judgment, and their kindness helped me remember who I was before I defined myself by my relationship. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I decided to do something meaningful with Eleanor's money. I created a scholarship fund in her name, designed to help single mothers pursue college degrees. I remembered what it felt like to work 2 jobs while trying to get an education, how exhausting and overwhelming it had been. I wanted to make that path easier for someone else. I also started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. Every Tuesday evening I would help with whatever was needed, serving meals, organizing donations, just listening to women share their stories. Many of them had experienced betrayals far worse than mine. Their strength and resilience inspired me. Eleanor's garden became my sanctuary. I hired a landscaper to help me restore it to its former glory, but I did most of the work myself. There was something healing about digging in the dirt, about planting seeds and watching them grow. Life continuing, despite everything. By the 1-year anniversary of Eleanor's death, I had transformed from a broken woman into someone new, not completely healed, but healing. Not without scars, but learning to see them as evidence of survival, rather than marks of failure. I sold the house Derek and I had shared. I did not want those memories anymore. The money from the sale went into the scholarship fund, which felt like turning poison into medicine. It was around this time that I met Thomas. I had enrolled in an art class at a local community center, something I had always wanted to try, but never had time for during my marriage. Thomas was in the same class, a quiet man with kind eyes and paint permanently staining his fingernails. He was a 4th-grade teacher, 42 years old, widowed 5 years earlier when his wife lost her battle with cancer. He had a 6-year-old daughter named Lily, who was, according to Thomas, the best thing that ever happened to him. We started talking after class one evening, comparing our terrible attempts at watercolor landscapes. He made me laugh with his self-deprecating humor. I made him laugh by accidentally knocking over my water cup and ruining my painting completely. We exchanged numbers just as friends at first. He would text me photos of Lily's artwork from school stick figures, with enormous heads and hearts floating everywhere. I would send him pictures of my garden, the flowers finally blooming after months of care. Slowly, carefully, a friendship developed. Neither of us was looking for romance. We were both still healing from our own wounds. But there was a comfort in his presence, an ease I had not felt with anyone in a long time. One Saturday he invited me to join him and Lily at the zoo. I almost said no. Being around a child felt like it might be too painful a reminder of the family I never had with Derek. But something made me say yes. Lily was a force of nature. She had her father's kind eyes, and her mother's curly hair, and she talked non-stop about every animal we saw. She held my hand as we walked through the butterfly exhibit, explaining very seriously that butterflies taste with their feet. By the end of the day, my cheeks hurt from smiling. I did not know what the future held with Thomas. I was not ready to label it, or define it, or make any promises. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, possibly, there was something to look forward to. It has been 2 years now since Derek tried to throw me away like garbage. 2 years since I learned that the man I loved had been lying to me, cheating on me, using me as a placeholder until something better came along. 2 years since Eleanor's final gift saved me from financial ruin and showed me that someone had seen my worth even when I could not see it myself. I still live in the Bexley mansion, though it feels like home now rather than a museum. I have filled it with new memories, dinner parties with friends, movie nights, with Rachel holiday celebrations that rival anything Eleanor herself might have hosted. The scholarship fund has helped 17 women so far. 17 single mothers who are now pursuing their dreams just like I once did. Every graduation ceremony I attend, every thank you letter I receive, reminds me that something beautiful can grow from the ashes of something painful. Thomas and I are still taking things slow. He has not asked me to define what we are, and I have not offered. But he is a constant presence in my life now, steady and warm and real. Lily calls me Miss Molly and demands that I attend every school play and art show. I have not missed one yet. I think about Derek sometimes, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of distant sadness. I wonder if he has learned anything from losing everything. I wonder if he ever thinks about what we could have had if he had just been honest and faithful. Probably not. People like Derek rarely learn from their mistakes. They just find new people to blame. But that is not my concern anymore. Derek is not my responsibility. His happiness is not my job. I gave that up the moment he showed me who he really was. The last thing I want to share with you is this. If you are going through something similar, if someone you trusted has betrayed you, if you feel like your whole world is falling apart, please know that you are not alone. The pain you feel right now is real and valid, and it matters. But it will not last forever. You are stronger than you know. You are worth more than anyone who would throw you away. And someday, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but someday you will look back on this moment and see it for what it truly is. Not an ending, a beginning. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ended up leading you somewhere better? Have you ever lost something you thought you could not live without, only to discover you were stronger than you imagined? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who is going through a hard time right now. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you have not already, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for letting me share my journey with you. I hope wherever you are, whatever you are facing, you find the strength to keep going. You deserve happiness. You deserve loyalty. You deserve love. Do not let anyone make you believe otherwise. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one.